Dear friends, today we have a very special guest at our American Center, James Patrick, who came directly from United States of America. And he was working as a congressman, he was working as a mayor of the city, and now we are working together in order to promote relationship between America, United States of America, and Azerbaijan. And I'm so happy to see our friend here at this university in Azerbaijan at the American Center. Let me just, in a very brief, short term, give you information about our American Center, which has been created approximately 8 years ago.
Yes.
8 years ago. This initiative came from Azerbaijan and America. Our friends from embassy and our friends from university. This joint venture gave us an opportunity to bring American culture, system of education, and information about United States of America to Azerbaijan. Modern technology, new books, CDs, and other things you can find here. And this center is open not only for students of the University of Languages, but for all Azerbaijanis. And as I know today here, not only students from our university, but our friends and colleagues from different universities, and maybe not only students, maybe kids also from secondary schools, school children, and our friends from different institutions also together with us. Because this university has special policy of open doors for those who are looking for some other options for future, education, culture, etc. American Center has been created together with our friends, as I said, from United States of America, but under the auspices of the President of my country. And the letter which we got during the opening of the center, we got from First Lady, and where this letter on the wall. She has sent letter with congratulation letter to this center, and money, the first money, came from the government, came directly from the President. Of course, United States of America also is involved, and at that period of time they gave quite big amount of money, but it's uncomparable with money which came from the government of Azerbaijan. At that period of time, we got from the government 1.5 million manats, which was approximately $2 million. $2 million at the very beginning. Then universities started to sponsor, to give their own money and financial resources to this center. And I want to express my gratitude to university staff, to my colleagues, because they gave me this opportunity to finance this center. Each year, students from top-ranked American university coming to this American center in order to learn Azerbaijani studies, Caucasian studies, Russian studies, Persian studies. They are living within the families. They are studying here Azerbaijani language. They are traveling a lot to the regions of Azerbaijan. And at the end of the story, they became new ambassadors of Azerbaijan to the United States of America, so-called ambassadors of Azerbaijan to the United States of America. We have traditions here at this American Center, and each guest from the United States of America is able to come to this center and openly discuss and listen our students and our guests. That's why today situation is exactly the same. I know that this young generation is going to raise some questions. I have heard about that. I don't know what kind of questions they're going to ask you, but I know exactly. I see Sabina Ramazanova, who just recently returned from Indiana University. Welcome back to American Center, to University of Languages. And of course, let me again greeting my friend, very good friend of mine, deputy member of the parliament who has been elected from this district, the Nasimi district, Professor Asim Mollazadeh, you are very welcome to our university again. And Shahla, she is the mother of this American Center. She is the boss of American Center, and she is doing a great job for America and for Azerbaijan. Welcome to our center. The floor is yours, please.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. President and Mr. Chairman and Professor and Chairman of the Democratic Reform Party and all of the school officials. I'm honored to have an opportunity to spend a little time with you. And rather than my giving any speech, I'd like to open it up to a dialogue. I'd like to have you ask questions that I might respond to. And I've been here in Baku several times. The first was in 1991, before most of you were born. And I've watched Baku grow and evolve and do so in a very impressive way, as has the nation of Azerbaijan, which now plays a very important role on the world stage. And so I want to learn more about Azerbaijan, the Caspian region, and I want to communicate what I learned to my colleagues in the Congress and friends in the United States. So with that, let me open it up to any questions that you might have.
Just I wanted to add that some representatives of our university, plus those who came to this center today, they are taking part in a very special program, which is called 50 Stars program. This program is a special one, and this program is about 50 United States of America states. And each star, each star is devoted to each state of the United States of America. And the idea, which is very worrying for me, because I'm from ruling body, came from opposition. You know, it came from Asim Mollazadeh. But the floor is yours, young generation. Please, you can ask your questions. Or maybe Sabina just recently came from Indiana.
Thank you very much, James Warren, for paying a visit to American Center. And thank you very much, Sean Manning, for your kind words.
You're very welcome.
So, I'm a graduate of Azerbaijan University of Languages, and right now I'm continuing my education at Indiana University of Bloomington. So, when I heard that we're going to have as a guest you, James Moore, I had one question in my mind. So right now in Indiana there is controversial situation. So maybe you know that just recently the governor of Indiana signed the bill into law titled, it's a little bit long, Religious Freedom Restoration Act, if you're familiar with that. So this act allows individuals or companies limit their services to people based on their age, ethnicity, gender, veteran status, sexual orientation. So being a part of Indiana community, it's hard because we just recently received a message from the president of Indiana University saying that Indiana University is against any kind of discrimination. And since we are very famous with Hoosier hospitality, I would like to know your personal opinion about this act. So what do you think about it? And does this law really aims at discriminating the rights of people, particularly living in Indiana State? Thank you very much.
It's appropriate to criticize Indiana's law because it's wrong and it's un-American, and it's designed to empower businesses to discriminate against people because they don't agree with their religion, with their dress, with their culture or their personal choices, or their sexuality, whatever it might be. And that's not consistent with the American Constitution or the Bill of Rights, which grants individual freedoms to be treated the same. So I see the law as a form of discrimination, and I don't like it. And I think that Governor Pence is going to pay a price for it. Already it means that while he was considering running for president, he can't do that because the vast majority of the American people will see this as trying to provide a legal means of discriminating against other people.
Thank you very much.
Well, okay, let's have this gentleman and then you, okay?
What is your point of view on the Iran nuclear talks?
I'm in favor of the Iran nuclear deal. The talks have taken place. Now it's time for a deal. I think it was done right, that there was a P5+1 negotiation, so you had many nations involved in the negotiation. The alternative was to go to war, which some people in the United States, believe it or not, thought was a good thing. There were some in Israel that thought it was a good thing. It was a wrong thing. It was a bad thing to go to war. It almost always is. This deal will ensure that Iran can continue to use nuclear energy for civil, peaceful purposes, but it will not be able to develop a nuclear weapon. There will be aggressive inspections, but I believe that Iran needs to be able to provide for its people. I don't agree with many of the judgments of Iran's government nor of its military, but if we isolate Iran, we are far more likely to wind up going to war or being in some conflict, and the government is going to be bolstered because when people are isolated, they draw together. When they're free to act as they choose, oftentimes they open up their minds and their hearts and their understanding, and that's what I want to happen in Iran. So I favor it.
Thank you. Please.
Hello, Mr. Moran. First of all, I want to welcome you and thank you on behalf of the Students' Youth Organization of my university for your time to spend with us and answering our questions. As I'm a student of international relations, my question is going to be related to international relations, if you allow me. And the first question is about how the crisis in Ukraine affected the relations of the United States with our regions, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Armenia. And also, which kind of changes is expected in the case of Hillary Clinton will be elected as a president of the United States? If the changes is expected, which kind of changes in the relations with Azerbaijan and with the region at all? Thank you.
He just recently elected as the leader of youth organization of this university. Very responsible and very special. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And there was another good question. All three questions have been good and appropriate. In this case, I think that Vladimir Putin made a mistake. He caused the rest of the West, at least, and much of the rest of the world to view him as a person who is not prepared to act according to international law. I can understand the annexation of Crimea because many of the people in Crimea consider themselves to be Russian, wanted to be part of Russia. It was still an illegal act by international law. But Putin has many soldiers and much equipment in eastern Ukraine. He says he doesn't, which is a lie, which again does not speak well of him as a world leader. I think that this precedent is very bad. The problem is that Ukraine is not a member of NATO. Some people don't understand why we would take special steps to save Ukraine, because there is some corruption in it. It borders with Russia. Some of the people are sympathetic to Russia. It's entirely possible that the eastern part of Ukraine could wind up being taken by Russia. I hope that does not happen. I think that would be wrong. But Mr. Putin, by his actions, has signaled that the world can't trust him, has to be wary of him. And if he continues his aggressiveness, I think that he and Russia are going to pay a price for it.
Thank you very much. Yes, please.
Mr. James Moran, thanks for your coming to our university and sharing your opinion with the public. I express my gratitude to you.
Thank you.
And my question to you is more serious. You have just mentioned you visited for the first time visited Azerbaijan in 1991. And according to your biography, you were a member of the Congress through 1991 till 2015.
That's correct.
And my question is, on October 24th, 1992, the United States Congress has adopted the resolution 907 to the Freedom Support Act. That act abolished private directly humanitarian aid to Azerbaijan Republic. While visiting Azerbaijan in 1991, you saw the existing humanitarian situation in Azerbaijan, that our people suffered from Armenian occupation, and we need humanitarian and economic support. And my question is that when you came back to the United States of America, have made any reports regarding humanitarian situation in Azerbaijan to prevent realization, implementation of the 907 resolution? Have it made any efforts and made any guidelines to the Congress to prevent that resolution? Thanks all.
Thank you. That's a very good question and well researched, so I appreciate your asking the question. In 1991, I went to both Armenia and Azerbaijan. I had been mayor of Alexandria, Virginia. There were constituents of mine who brought to my attention an earthquake in Leniniken. It's now called Gyumri, but it was called Leniniken then because they still have Soviet names. I went to Armenia back in the 1980s. I saw the destruction. I felt badly for the people. I had never met anyone from Azerbaijan. I wanted to see Azerbaijan. At the time, I think it was President Elchivai who, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, was president at the time. But it was in a state of almost chaos at the time because it had been part of Russia and was just in the process of gaining its independence. And when I went back, I had no strongly held views other than I felt badly for the people who had been hurt in the earthquake. I had established a sister city relationship with Leninican, subsequently called Bloomberg, and the city of Alexandria, Virginia. I worked with the Armenian lobby, the Armenian community, but I felt that I owed it to myself, just as I did on the issue of Israel and the Palestinians, to research, to make sure that I knew what I was talking about. I had never heard the other point of view, the other side of the issue. I didn't even know there was an issue, frankly. John Kerry introduced Section 907. I don't think he had ever been to Azerbaijan, but he had a large Armenian community in Massachusetts. And I don't even know how I voted on the resolution, frankly, because it just wasn't something I cared strongly about, other than seeing people that had been made homeless by the earthquake. But as I researched the issue, I found that, and through subsequent events, I found that it was wrong, in my view, for Armenia to take over and settle 20% of Azerbaijan in the Nagorno-Karabakh region. I felt that the Armenians were unduly influenced by Russia. Much of government seemed to be Russian officers. It was quite corrupt. And I found that the American people, and thus especially the American Congress, had no knowledge of Azerbaijan. Most had never visited Baku, had no personal relationships with any Azerbaijani in the Azeri. And once I started researching the history, over time my views evolved. That's why I'm here, because I realized that Azerbaijan's interests are not being represented fairly or accurately, and in many ways not at all. Frankly, Azerbaijan would be better off if it were not mentioned than when it does get mentioned, it's in a negative light. So I felt that I should share what I know of the situation with other people who may be reaching their conclusions based on inadequate or inaccurate information. So my view is I have a personal responsibility to myself to learn the facts and to act in the way that I feel is right. And that's why I have taken a position supportive of the people of Azerbaijan and I think is the importance of the Baku pipeline being extended by SOCAR through Turkey and into Europe, because I think it's in the interests of Europe and subsequently and concomitantly the United States that the energy that powers Europe come from Azerbaijan rather than from Russia, because that would give Mr. Putin a stranglehold over Europe, which would not be in the interests of Europe or the United States.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question.
Please, but only those who are sitting on the first line. What about those who are sitting a little bit far? Maybe.
Oh, we'll let this young lady ask a question, but then the rest of the people in the second, third, and fourth row, think about it, you know?
First of all, I would like to welcome you here in American Center. And my question is, speaking about the conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia, the Karabakh conflict, what's the best solution?
The best solution, in my mind, would be to put a pipeline through Armenia, coming from Baku, providing revenue to Armenia, which would be about $250 million a day, I think, and have Armenia dependent upon good relations with Azerbaijan. But only would they get that revenue if they gave back the territory of Nagorno-Karabakh.
Thank you. Thank you. Somebody from...
Well, you have another young man in the front row.
Really?
Come on, I'm waiting for the people in the back rows. Wait, go ahead, we'll have this gentleman since he took the initiative.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
your president is telling you that he wants some questions from the second, third, and fourth row, so come on.
Come on, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saido, and thank you very much, Mr. Patrick. I want to ask about that after opening a project, TANAP project, what will Russia after this opening?
Sorry, I don't understand the question.
I didn't either.
What will be after the...
Opening
This
project, TANAP project.
Okay.
The TANAP project.
TAP project. Yes.
What will be
So
after?
the Trans-Adriatic pipeline,
Yes.
you're referring
What
to?
will be after? If these projects are going to implement, if I understood you
You're
correctly.
asking about the Russian reaction, I guess, or role
Yes.
of Russia for European energy security. Will it change?
Okay, thank you.
Well, how Russia reacts, I think, is going to be dependent upon the ability and willingness of Turkey to protect the pipeline and of other surrounding countries, including Europe, to protect that pipeline. I can't predict what Mr. Putin is going to want to do. I know he doesn't want the Trans-Adriatic pipeline. He doesn't want the Trans-Anatolian pipeline. But too bad. But I do think that the nations that will make money from the pipeline going through, and particularly nations that will be benefited by it, which is much of Europe, have an interest in protecting that pipeline.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from that one? Yes, Paul, at last.
Leave it to a woman to have the
Yeah.
courage to ask the first question.
First of all, I want to say that welcome to our university, and my question is, which role do translators in politics?
Which one?
Which role do translators in politics?
Which role?
Sorry? Which role do the politics have, do the translators have in politics?
Translators, interpreters.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
well,
interpreters.
that's how we communicate.
Yes.
I don't know the Turkish or the Azeri language. The only way I know how to communicate with other people who don't know English is through an interpreter. And fortunately, we have interpreters. Presidents use interpreters. At all of the major negotiations, the world summits, there are always interpreters. Sometimes interpreters can be seen between two presidents or three presidents. You'll see three interpreters. So it's terribly important to know other languages. It's frankly invaluable. I am disappointed in myself that I don't know other languages well enough to speak. I studied French, but I didn't have an opportunity to use it, and so I'm not even fluent in French. And I consider it a handicap. And I appreciate the tolerance of so many people, like the two gentlemen and the lady sitting on the panel here, to be able to speak in English to me. And I appreciate all of you being able to speak in English. Otherwise, we would be dependent on an interpreter, which is a fine thing, except it's best if you can communicate one-on-one, face-to-face. So I admire all of you who have chosen to learn other languages other than your native language. That's great.
Thank you. Oh yes, activity is growing. Who is next?
Hello, Mr. Morin. Thanks for coming. I've been living in America as an exchange student, and my program was called FLEX. So my question is, what do you think about these exchange programs and how they impact the students, and like both in America and Azerbaijan and other countries?
I think the exchange programs are wonderful. They're very necessary. They're almost the hope for the world, because all politics is based on personal relationships. So if you get to know people in other countries, you can understand them. You can understand better the people that they live with in their own community and in their nation. And when you understand people, you are more likely to respect them. And when you respect people, they're more likely to become friends. And you don't wage war against your friends. And I think a lot of wars and a lot of conflicts are due to misunderstandings and to ignorance. And so education, the Latin means leading out of, educo, leading out of ignorance. But educational exchanges are leading into a better understanding of this great world that we were fortunate to be born into. So I think they're very important, and I'm involved in them. I'm on the board of the World Affairs Council, the principal objective of which is to promote international exchanges, particularly educational exchanges. I'm with Global Ties, which is an international visitor exchange. I am a friend of Harriet Fulbright's and have been very supportive of the Fulbright Fellowships. And I try to be involved in anything that is involved with international educational exchanges. And I was on the, what was it called? The Open World Institute as well, which does the same thing with regard to elected officials in Russia and former Soviet satellites, the Library of Congress runs. All of those organizations I've been part of, and I have done so because I greatly value the benefit of educational exchanges internationally.
Thank you very much. Who's next?
Mr. Moran, thanks
Okay.
for coming.
And then you.
My name is Iveta, surname Ibrahimova. Mr. Moran, I know you graduated in New York University Faculty Economy, and you did some important things for protect nature and improve economic of America. But what do you advise to us? What we must do for protect Azerbaijani nature and improve our economy? Thank you.
Well, this is kind of, you're correct, you and obviously did your research. I chaired the Interior and Environment Committee when I was in the Congress. I was also chairman of the Animal Protection Caucus for a number of years. My own view is that we are blessed not just to be alive, but to be alive in the midst of so many other beautiful living things. Animals, plants, the rise and fall of the sun, the moon, all of these things about us. It's almost as though this is what heaven was meant to be if we focus on the beauty around us. Unfortunately, some people don't, either out of selfishness, out of ignorance, they're just in distraction. And some people, when they see beautiful things, they want to destroy them, which is basically the process of creating a hell. Wars are hell, literally and figuratively. So I feel that we all have a responsibility to protect the living things around us, because there's a certain divinity to creation. And that's why I feel strongly about trying to protect the natural world, as well as the, obviously, living creatures, especially human beings.
Thank you. But she's first and then you.
Oh, so we're actually going to get a guy asking a question so far. It's all been the women in the second, third, and fourth rows. Yes.
Firstly, I want to welcome you here in our country and in this beautiful place. And I'm a student of Azerbaijan State Economic University, and I study economy. So it's interesting to me to know, as we know, you voted against the war in 2002 against Iraq.
Yes.
And my question is, which benefits and profits did it give to economy and to politics of Iraq mainly?
The Iraq War was a mistake. Worse, it may have been a deliberate wrongdoing on the part of the American government. There were some people, in my view, who felt they could gain by the Iraq War, politically, financially, and in other ways. My view was that the only victors of an American-U.S.-Iraq war would be Iran. That was only going to be the victor. Now, George W. Bush, 6 months into the war, had a discussion with Iraqi expatriates. And they started talking about the conflict between the Sunni and the Shia. And he asked, well, what's a Sunni and what's a Shia, and what do they have to do with Iraq? I only mention that because I think it exposes the fact that we elected a president who didn't know what he was doing. I felt very strongly that it was wrong. I spoke against it when 80% of the American people were for it, and the newspaper in my district, which is the Washington Post, was very strongly for the war. So I've been criticized throughout my political career for taking votes like that, but I don't regret it. And I think if you were to look at how much money companies like Halliburton made from the war, of which Richard Cheney was the CEO before becoming vice president, before making himself vice president. And if you look at the people who have benefited from the war and the destruction, it isn't the United States, and it's not people who want a safe and prosperous and fair world in the Middle East.
Thank you very much. Please, the floor is yours, please.
So my name is Iskandar Sinzadeh. I'm student of international relations. First of all, it's a great honor for us to see you here, and we're really thankful to our director to give us this kind of opportunity to talk with you, actually. My question is that you know what's the process in Syria. We know that it was a terror act over there, and it resulted in the death of the civilian people. As you are representing the United States of America, and we know the ideal of the United States of America is a spreading ideals, liberty, freedom, democracy, and equality. So what's the government, what was your government, how do you react the process of staying in Syria, and how was their position actually? Thank you.
I think that Syria is an abomination. It's an indictment of the world around us because we haven't been able to stop the slaughter of people and the destruction of a nation. I felt that when it was verified that Bashar al-Assad had use chemical weapons, and our president had said that that's a red line. If you use chemical weapons, you will regret it. I felt that he should have bombed Assad's airfields. He should have reacted in a way that made the president of Syria regret it. Instead, he looked to advice for England, and the UK Parliament had just returned. It was August from vacation. They weren't sure what they were voting on. They voted against it. The US Congress was very much opposed to the president taking action, as were the American people, because they were afraid that this was going to be a repeat of the Iraq War, which they were finally beginning to realize how wrong that was. As a result, it has continued. Now, it might have continued anyway. I mean, I don't think that we should have been more deeply involved than destroying his aircraft, because he was using his aircraft, particularly his helicopters, to slaughter people throughout the country that were opposed to his reign. But I think we should have acted in that manner. The Alawites are a small minority, and they're afraid, and probably rightfully so, that if Assad loses, revenge will be taken on every Alawite. So they're fighting for their lives. And his mother and his uncle, we're told, are pushing much of this slaughter. But he has to take responsibility for it, President Assad. The United States is in a difficult position, because if we arm the rebels, there is a high likelihood that many of those arms are going to get into the hands of Daesh, the so-called Islamic State. It's not an Islamic State. I don't think they have any right to call themselves Muslim, frankly, because they don't comply with the most basic tenets of the Quran in their killing of innocent people and the actions that they take. But they could well benefit by our supplying the opposition, because the opposition has been weak. And al-Nusra has close ties with al-Qaeda. Having said that, it looks like some of the rebel forces are gaining ground. To the extent they gain ground, we're going to help them by training them and equipping some of them and giving some intelligence support so that they have as good a prospect as possible of eventually prevailing, but I'm not optimistic.
Thank you very much. More questions? Yes, please.
First of all, welcome to Azerbaijan, welcome to our university. I have a question about relationship between USA and European Union. And I would like to ask your opinion about political influence of USA in Europe in general and in European Union. Thank you.
It's interesting when Vladimir Putin took over Crimea and was clearly being aggressive in eastern Ukraine. He still is. I went to London to see how London would feel about enforcing sanctions against Russia. It's interesting that of the 11 people that Russia sanctioned in response to our sanctioning many of the oligarchs, preventing them from being able to travel to the United States and so on, there were 11 people that Putin chose to sanction. Only one legislator of all of them, which is yours truly. So there was no love lost, but I obviously had an intense interest in what was going on related to Syria. I think the reason why Putin chose to sanction me was that I objected to the American military buying helicopters from Rosaborn Export, which is the Russian arms exporter. It was owned by the state. We were buying helicopters primarily from Rosaborn Export for Afghanistan. We were told that it's the only helicopter that the Afghan soldiers know how to maintain and to operate. I went over to Afghanistan, turned out not to be true, but that's what we were told. And Rosaborn Export is the same state-owned Russian company which is supplying most of the arms to Assad in Syria. So why are we subsidizing a Russian company that is supplying a nation that we are against, and in fact, might be involved in the conflict? Actually, we are involved, more so than most people realize. And it didn't make sense. So I offered an amendment on the floor of the House of Representatives, and it passed. I think that's why he sanctioned me. But I wanted to know, how effective are the sanctions going to be? And I was told by banking and real estate people in London, they're not going to comply. It's not going to make any difference whether we impose sanctions or not, because they can't afford to sanction the Russian oligarchs, because the oligarchs have too much money invested in the London real estate market. And if they sanction them, if they had to take it out, the market would collapse. So they're not going to let that happen. Now, you might say, well, that's a bad relationship between the US and the European Union. At least they were telling us the truth. I think we have a relatively good relationship with Europe. I was disappointed when the US Congress took measures to try to punish France for not supporting the Iraq War. France did the right thing by not supporting the Iraq War. We wound up relabeling French fries in our House members' dining room freedom fries instead of French fries. We couldn't order French toast. It had to be freedom toast. That was goofy. And it was also wrong because France happened to be right. So the US Congress is not always right. Sometimes Europe calls us out when we're not right. Sometimes Europe isn't right and we call them out. But I think on the whole, it is a very positive relationship. I think all of Europe is an ally of the United States, and we act together on almost all important things. And it's also the case that with NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, Europe's only real defense comes from America's military capability. The United States spends more every year than every other nation combined. Combined. We spend $500 billion. Actually, it's in excess of that. It's more than $600 billion today. We do each year. And that money enables Europe to have a defense, because while Europe is willing to fight, they can't even transport their troops or much of their equipment without American capability. But we would be there for Europe because we know, just as Franklin Roosevelt figured out, that the defense of individual liberties and democracy and human rights it is dependent upon a united Europe and United States of America.
Thank you very much. And if we have, yes, additional question?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, please.
So, as you have mentioned, most of the wars, they start from terrorism, and of course, such a big country as the United States, it tries to do something against it, and we all know that United States being like such a democratic country that always underlines the freedom of its citizenship, sometimes it keeps track on some text message or some personal talks between some particular people. So my question is, don't you think that such a like democratic country as the United States like does that, and doesn't it break personal rights of people?
The National Security Agency that does that just this week released a report saying it was wrong and they're not going to collect as much personal data anymore. So we try to police ourselves, but we also have to make a judgment call between the safety of our citizens and their individual privacy. And we may not get it right all the time, but I do think there need to be compromises, and that's why people get elected to office, to make those decisions. Sometimes they're difficult, but everything is not black and white. Everything is not always clear. You have to make a judgment based upon what you think is in the interest of the majority of people.
Thank you very much, and on behalf of my students and on behalf of our friends, I want to express my gratitude to our friend, because so sincere, so open, and so smart, and very important answers to not so easy questions.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah, really fascinating answers to the very important questions, and I hope that after this meeting we will be able to understand America a little bit better than we are today. And again, this is really very important to have this kind of open conversation with those who created modern United States of America. Mr. Patrick, we have at this American Center just recently created a TV studio. You see cameras, and this is our camera. This is not press from another part of our institutions in Azerbaijan.
This is not the Armenian lobby.
No, this is not Armenian lobby. This is Azerbaijani lobby. This is our TV studio. And I ask you to give a small interview to this TV studio after our so interesting questions and answers part of communication. But before closing this part of our meeting, I want to give the floor to Asim Mollazadeh. Maybe he interviewed because he's from opposition.
Yes. I'm opposition to your government, but I'm supported to this university.
Which is a part of this government.
This is not a part of government, this is a part of the future of our country. And I appreciate that here in this university, we have young, talented students, and I believe that future in your hands. And we believe that young Azerbaijani, well trained, maybe you will have a chance to continue your education accepted in many American or European universities. But there is one important thing for us. We are friends of the United States because we share in the same values. Values of human rights, values of democracy, human dignity, and also in the United States, which is important for Azerbaijan, there are traditions of secularism. And I just visited LA, I visited a lot of synagogues, I've been in mosque, I've been in church. It's important for Azerbaijan that in the United States we have also partners who understand us. And it's important for you because we all need to have Azerbaijan modern and strong country and smart country. It's based on your vision. I'm supporting you, I'm supporting the university.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Asim, and special thanks to Shahla Hanum. Especially today we saw students not only from our university, but students from economical university and school children from school and other institutions and secondary schools from Baku. Thank you very much for coming and being with us. Thank you.
you ask how I have seen Azerbaijan change,
Right.
I can't really answer that question because I haven't seen any part of Azerbaijan outside of Baku. But Baku has changed enormously. This is not the same city that it was in 1991, and it's changed for the better. This is a modern city. It's a beautiful city. Some former Soviet satellite countries still looked Stalinist, where there's no style, no architecture. They're just flat gray buildings. That is not the case in Baku. Whoever is responsible, and I understand that it's President Aliyev who has been responsible for the appearance of Baku. Baku looks beautiful, and I have been very impressed with its economic and its social growth. So that's why I want to keep coming, because it's a very nice city to visit, and I suspect to be part of.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moran. So I have another question to you. We know that the Congress passed a bill just recently saying that the Congress should have oversight on President in his negotiations with Iran. How would you assess the chances for a nuclear deal, given that the Congress passed a bill limiting the activities of the President? So how would you see the chance of nuclear deal?
I think the nuclear deal with Iran is going to be approved, because while the Congress can be consulted, President Obama agrees they should be, and he fully intends to consult with them. But I don't think the Congress is going to be able to get its act together in such a way that the majority can agree upon how to amend the nuclear Iran deal. As a result, I think the deal will go through largely as it has been written by the administration, and I think that's a good thing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moore. Another question that I have too is, how do you see the future collaboration between U.S. and Azerbaijan? So, if it's going to be expanding, in which directions we are going to collaborate?
The relationship between Azerbaijan and the United States, I think, can only get better, because it's not terribly good right now. The United States has concerns that over stories they read about in terms of the treatment of the press. They don't know the background of any stories. All they know is what they read, and so they're concerned. So the relationship, as far as I'm concerned, is not as good as it should be. And then there are people who feel it is their responsibility to badmouth Azerbaijan and to some extent Turkey because of things that happened as long ago as 100 years ago. Given the role that Azerbaijan could play in supplying the energy to power Europe, preventing Mr. Putin from having a chokehold over that energy, I think the United States should be more supportive of Azerbaijan and its growth and maturation.
This is a very nice point, Mr. Moore. So what do you think, how this can be accomplished? How United States should envision Azerbaijan that is a key partner in the region?
There are many things that could and should be done, in my view. One of them is exchanges of public officials, having more people travel to Azerbaijan. Another is exchanges of students, such as yourself, who has gone to the University of Indiana. You understand the United States, can better interpret what the United States is doing and why. And the United States, can learn from Azeri students and citizens and public officials. It's the development of personal relationships, which I think is our best hope for smoothing relations between the two countries.
Thank you very much. This is a very good point that you mentioned. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My pleasure.